steering wheel. Lots of steering wheel, yeah. Give him steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on! Whoa!
Your leg, my please. Your leg.
How the f*** is that possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? From the radio. The rest of the race. Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track. Down that interstate.
Hello and welcome back inside the Park for May for podcast number 897, the Belgian Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know what we do on race weekends?
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do on race weekends. Before doing that, though, I have to find somebody that actually knows how to race a car, a professional race car driver, the sporting manager of Heart of Racing, Aston Martin IMSA team, and soon to be Valkyrie WEC Le Mans. Whew, you know him, you love him.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charsley, the International.
It is Paul Charsley. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing good. Yeah,
Wow.
getting ready to head off for another race. But
Where are you going?
We're going to Road America.
That's a good track.
It is a great track. Remember someone asked a couple of weeks ago
Yeah.
which track we'd like Formula One to race on. This is it, baby.
This is it. This
Yeah.
is the one.
Yeah.
It's a very good track. Yeah. So you're going to be
Yes.
heading up there and going to be winning that one, I feel like.
Wow. Yeah. No pressure. Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure, but
No
that's
pressure at all.
we're going to do everything we can to do that. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good track.
Yes, good track. Well, Paul, we're going to talk about the Belgian Grand Prix today because that's what
Yeah.
we do. Before talking about the teams and drivers, let's talk a little formation lap here, set the table a little bit about what is affectionately known as the mighty Spa-Francorchamps.
Yes, it is.
I can't lie, people. And for you that have been listening to the podcast for a long time, you know this already, but this is my favorite track. I just absolutely love this track. It's been on the F1 calendar as long as the British Grand Prix has, since 1950. And this weekend, Paul, it was in great shape. You just drove there a couple of weeks ago, so you got to
did.
see it, but it was in great shape.
Yeah, I did drive it a couple of weeks ago, which was incredible, and it didn't fall short of expectations. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
I reflect on it. It's like every corner had its own characteristics, its own challenge. Every corner, judging your entry speed was crucial to getting through the corners properly. And that's why I think people like George and everybody else, when they come out of there with some success, they know they really did something because really, as I said, there's like Pujon, you have to get the line exactly right. You know, there's certain turns you just have to get as much entry speed. The only turn I don't like there is the last chicane, right?
The bus stop,
It's not even, the old bus stop was cool, but whatever it is now, that's like literally the only corner on this track that I don't like. But yeah, after driving it, it's got to be the best track I've ever driven in my life. And I think a lot of people will agree with that for sure.
Yeah, I think most of the drivers all do. It's the one track you actually feel like you're going somewhere. You know?
Yeah. But as I said, every corner has its own characteristic.
Yeah.
It's so challenging,
Yeah,
but so rewarding.
You don't think about like Stavelo, but that chicane down there is tricky. You know,
Yeah,
Malmedy
Yep.
and Blanchimont. You know, and they all have their nuance. You know, at the top at
They
Radio
sure
Lacombe.
do. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if you don't get Lacombe right, you know, even the no-name corner, it's it's tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky.
track.
Yeah, and like Eau Rouge, Radion, similar to Blanchimont to me, where you get it right and you can go flat out.
Yeah.
But if you get it wrong, wow,
Wow.
it goes horribly wrong. So you got to make sure that first third of the corner you're confident you're going to come out of it. You know, else there is time to make an adjustment. Like if Eau Rouge, you can go straight, or Blanchimont, you can just kind of let it ride it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so amazing track.
It is. Well, it's relatively short aggregate pit stop time for being an over 4 mile long track. It was 18 seconds and change. And you couple that with the length of the track and the ease of passing, or at least it's a little easier here. Although I would argue that the DRS shortened this year really kind of clamped down on that and made it a little more difficult. Paul, a little known fact here. Did you know it actually can be raining on the whole damn circuit at Spa?
yes. Just ask Ian James.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Oh, talking about the pit lane. When I ran there, we ran the endurance pit lane, which is really long, where you enter where the Formula One cars enter and you exit just at the top of Radion, which is extremely long time to be on the. But the entry to the pits is so tight. I can't even imagine doing it in a Formula One car. I really can't. It's just so tight and narrow. It's quite a challenge to get slowed down and try and not just blow that whole section there.
Yeah, it's amazing. And because of those characteristics about that track, I would argue that it's probably relatively easy to blow the strategy at a track like this because there's so many dynamics. This new tarmac, the degradation wasn't as much as they thought it would be. The tire delta compounds, the tire deltas between compounds, the tire deltas between pit stop strategies. It's easy to blow this race from strategy, but it seems like it would be wickedly hard to nail it. And nail the strategy here. Right.
Pace differentials, tire differentials, short pit lane, all equals just 1-2 second little split can change your whole race, right?
Yeah. And when you think of Le Source to Lacombe, that entire stretch is impacted by how well or how poorly you get in and out of Le Source.
Right.
And that tracks all the way down to Lacombe.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't nail the source and get out of there correctly, then you carry that reduction in speed all the way through Eau Rouge, Radion, down Kemmel Straight until you get to Lacombe.
Although there is kind of like a speed correction in Eau Rouge.
Is there? You can cheat a little bit and gain some.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just saying if you blow La Source a little bit, you can still carry the speed through Eau Rouge and up over Radion. Because there's just that compression and the hill just kind of takes a little speed up edge off. And as we saw, even Max Verstappen was actually lifting just so he wouldn't bottom out there. So you can kind of recoup a little bit, but obviously, that momentum carries through all the way.
Yeah. Just brutal. And Max looked dominant all weekend long. But in P3 in the qualifying, it did have me wondering a little bit, and I instantly started second-guessing my fantasy picks when I saw Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton up in P3. I thought, I watched Friday practice, and they didn't seem to be there, and now they're there, And I was like, I still had McLaren favored at this race.
Yeah, me too. I had them at 1-2 for sure.
Yeah, I did too. I had them 1-2. The race was going to be impacted by Max having that engine replacement penalty, or taking that fifth engine, only allowed 4 in the season per car. So he took that fifth engine. They've done that 3 years now on the trot. This is the track Red Bull to do it. I did find it interesting, as Red Bull is wont to do. They trim their car out for Sector 2 with a little heavier wing. They gain a lot in Sector 2, where they may lose in 1 and 3. McLaren going the other way, maybe trimming their cars out, kind of exposed that a little bit in the wet qualifying, where they didn't have that downforce, and grip level that they would have enjoyed in a wet qualifying, and trimmed that out for the race. So certainly the race is going to be impacted. Max was on pole, started back in P11. Many wondered, with very good reason, mind you, just how long it would take for Max to march his way back up to the lead, win the race. But Martin Brundle was actually correct on this in saying that it's not a foregone conclusion that's going to happen this year. And I'm happy to say I didn't believe that either, because I didn't even factor Max on the podium in my picks. So I didn't think it was going to happen either. Unfortunately, I completely made a hash of my picks. They were terrible because I had McLaren 1-2, and that didn't happen. So anyway, it was interesting race. It was a 2-stop race, won by a 1-stopping car. So let's talk about it. We'll jump in, start off the sharp end of the grid with Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton in P1, George Russell at DSQ disqualified. Lewis had a great start, got past Perez, Paul, at the beginning, was up amongst the Ferrari of Leclerc. After a couple of laps, basically, it was because he was battling with Perez that allowed Leclerc to not get mugged down Kemmel Straight. retain that lead. But it took a couple of laps, and eventually that Ferrari deficit in pace was kind of exposed. Lewis took the lead. Lewis had a 2-second gap, covered Leclerc during both of his stops, but when he did his second stop, he came out behind Russell and couldn't make the pass on George despite having fresher tires, so he finished second. Got a little chippy in the post-race, kind of threw his team under the bus, said, that he wasn't happy about it. Team didn't tell him that his teammate was going to undercut him. Maybe he would have driven harder. Said if he did it all over again, he'd come up with his own strategy. Yeah, he's a little chippy in the press there. And then he was handed the victory because, as we'll talk about George in a minute with the DSQ, Lewis ends up taking his 105th win on the season. Lewis said, it's never great to lose, get disqualified. And he said, it's never great to inherit a win like this either. To be fair to Lewis, he had a hell of a good race, qualified very well, took the lead, led the race, had a 2-second gap, covered Leclerc on both stops. I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed about here. Lewis did a hell of a job. Yeah,
he did. What a shocker. The Mercedes team, I mean, what a season we're having right now. And as I said, everyone expecting Verstappen to come through the field. Maybe they haven't been looking at the past few races. We got a tight battle here. Max does have a buffer, but the likes of Mercedes have now won, 3 races in a row?
3 out of the last 4.
3 out of 4, yeah, that's right, because Piastri won. But, you can't ignore that at this point. It's they've done an incredible job, as has McLaren in bringing the fight to Red Bull, and Ferrari's still trying, but and they still are in the fight, but they just haven't showed race winning caliber yet. But I think Lewis drove a great race, and he just and I don't think he got a bad rub in the strategy. I just think what happened was even the team itself was surprised at what Russell did. I mean, you can't undermine what Russell did, so I don't think Lewis should be mad at his team. I think they ran a strategy where, looking at everything, all their numbers, everything, he should have had, been by Russell with 4 laps to go without any problems. What they did with Russell was trying to just maximize a result, not even thinking he could win the race. But ultimately, he did such a magnificent job in the car in getting everything out of the tire and no more than he needed to, and the pressure from Lewis behind. As soon as he caught him, you thought he was going to go by, but no, I don't think he could have done it for many more laps. But obviously, they're saving their battery power, they're using it effectively, and that's exactly what George was able to do for those last 2 laps when finally Lewis got on his butt, and Lewis, had a chance, but he just wasn't able to swing it. So I think rather than diss the team, I would praise Russell for what he did in the car. And let's talk about George, because it was really interesting, and maybe it's just because I'm a Yankee and I see this, but the initial headlines on George's win was things like Russell outfoxes Hamilton for a win. Mercedes gets a 1-2, but heartbreak for Hamilton. Those are the headlines I read. Right? Yeah, that's crazy.
Didn't those headlines change when he got the DSQ and Lewis got the 1? Then it was like overripe, dripping with praise, and Lewis on his amazing 105th win, and and they were amending Toto's comments. Toto said that Lewis was a very deserving winner because he was the fastest 2-stopping car on track. They left the two stopping out. They just said that, Lewis is deserving because he was the fastest guy on track. He wasn't. George was, So, and I don't know, as a Yankee, I find it's unfortunate because I want to talk about George. And for Lewis Hamilton fans, I can praise George and it not be a pejorative against Lewis here, okay?
Right.
George radioed the team. Once he got on his hards, he felt great. He said the car came alive, the tires were not degrading, he was hooked up, and he said, you got to go with your gut feeling. And my gut feeling at that time was, I asked the team, consider a 1-stopper, So the team then looked at the data, ran the numbers, were clear enough from cars behind, and they said, you know what? Whether he stops or doesn't, he's going to finish right around P5, and this will consolidate it. So let's go for it. If he feels comfortable with the car, let's go for it. They were trying to consolidate a P4, P5 type of finish for him, and that's what their calculation showed. Now think about that. At the time, were they going to radio Lewis and say, your teammate's going to undercut you and he's going to drive like no one's ever driven before and win the race, so hustle up? No, they thought that George would end up in P4, P5, consolidating that position. So they said, yeah, let's go for it. What he did is he did an exceptional job of managing the tires, Paul, as you said. He didn't use more than he had to. He left plenty of tire at the end to defend his lead along with the battery pack. And I would say some incredibly good defending. He knew where Lewis was going to go for it, saved his battery. He staved off the DRS and Kemmel Straight. That's not easy to do. And unfortunately, I would argue this, for me, was one of the drives of the season in my mind. It was a champion's drive by anyone's measure, and probably the best drive in George's career. And unfortunately, he came in post-race scrutineering, he was 1.5 kilograms too light. In old money, roughly around a pound. Now, could you argue that a pound makes a difference in pace? Sure, it does. It does. But I don't think that's the difference here. I think the difference here was the fact that George saved plenty of tire. The tire wasn't degrading like most of the teams thought it would. And he just was heads up, smart, and put in a hell of a drive to win that race. It's just a damn shame he got the DSQ, Paul.
Yeah, sure is. And these things don't come, they always save tire or whatever. This is a very disciplined manner in which to drive for 30 laps and save a tire and have enough left to defend. Yeah. And he had to work on that every lap, every corner. It takes a lot, because he didn't seem like he was anywhere. No. Really. He seemed like he was the P5 guy, right?
He did.
Lewis was the guy, but he just... And he could feel it, and he's got some years under his belt now. He can understand the tire. He understands himself. He's not shy to be vocal about things he's thinking in his head to go to the team, and he sent it to him. And they said, "Hey, if you believe that you can make that happen, then go for it." There was no lose in that situation. Little did they know what they could have won with the drive he did. So I thought it was great. I mean, it is a shame. I don't think the weight is the difference between Russell holding off Lewis or not.
No.
I mean, but it is a rule, and shame on the team for not giving themselves enough buffer. There's a lot of talk about, there was not enough rubber left on tire. Yeah, but as a team, you account for these things. Things happen in a race. Things fall off. Things, changes. You have to give yourself a little butter. You don't take it down to the nth degree, because you're putting yourself in severe jeopardy, and someone got something wrong, because I'm sure they don't try to do that either. No. As we know, fuel it doesn't affect the weight, because they take all the fuel out anyway. So it was literally what that car had on it, minus the fuel, and that's where they have to be. And they got it wrong, and teams do get it wrong. We see it in IMSA. We gave ourselves a buffer too. And sometimes scales can be different. Sometimes you miss something. Maybe maybe someone took something off. Maybe they used a different whatever. It's the team's duty to keep that car in the safe zone as close as you can, but keep it in the safe zone.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and I think you're right. If we were talking about a new team to F1 or maybe a junior team, but we're talking about Mercedes. Mercedes won 8 constructor titles on the trot. This isn't a team that makes those kind of mistakes. So until, Mark Hughes wrote, and I have the utmost respect for Mark, he wrote that is it conceivable you could lose 1.5 kilograms in tire weight by going on a one stint? Mm-hmm. They never even ran a one stint simulation. Most teams ran 2, and some ran 3 stint simulations, but nobody ran a one stint. So would they have known they'd have worn that much rubber off? And could you lose 1.5? He said it's absolutely possible to do, but it doesn't really matter, because I think to your point is you have to anticipate these things as a team at that level. Yeah. And the good news is Mercedes usually does. But until they do the forensics, I don't know if they'll share the reasons with us, but until they do the forensics and find out what really kind of happened, I don't think there was anything. I don't think there was anything nefarious in what they were trying to do. I just think somebody somewhere got it wrong.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because it really spoiled what I think is one of the drives of the season for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we go through scrutineering a lot with the sports cars and everything. And during the weekend, you keep throwing the car back on the sanctioning body's scale. Your scale doesn't count.
Yeah.
It's their scale that matters.
Yeah.
And if you do a change on the car, you take it back to their scale because things change.
Yeah.
Ride height changes. But I mean, the easiest thing to measure is weight and ride height. And, and that's a lot of what they do in the scrutineering bays. So simplify it. They're the things you definitely shouldn't be caught on.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
You got to know. I mean, something breaks and the ride height changes. We've seen that before with the plank issue and things like that. That's something else. But fundamentals, very surprising to be missed. So that they've definitely got to figure out what happened there and why it happened. And whether we do find out, even whatever they say, I'm not even sure it'll be the truth.
I don't think they're going to tell us what really
it doesn't
happened.
really matter. But the big thing is they need to fix it. And unfortunately for George Russell, he lost a victory that was, one of the most impressive drives we've seen for a very long time.
Yeah, it really is. So do I feel that Lewis, this win for him is any less? No, I think he had a hell of a day. He drove a hell of a race. But do I think George should feel bad about the DSQ? No, because he knows he won it. Yeah. And he did an amazing job. Yeah. So anyway, all right.
Yeah, the good thing for him is he knows where he's going to be and that this is his team now.
Yes.
And this is, one victory lost, but he's proving to the team, he's going to lead this team and can be victorious on many occasions. So they should feel good about it, even though they feel bad about, obviously, the DSQ. So.
Yeah, it was interesting. The post-race they interviewed Toto. They said, was that George's call on the one stop, or was the team already working on that? He goes, oh, well, he kind of dodged the whole thing. And it's like, you know what? I don't know definitively. I'm not listening to their radio, but the first time I remember hearing anyone mention something about a one stop was George radioing the team.
Yeah, right. I mean, we'd have to go back and replay it, but it seemed like he was the first one to bring that up. What was the deal with Toto anyway? He was the most depressed one too, because he didn't know at that time, unless he did know already, that the team, were going to get disqualified. But they had a 1-2, and he looked like it had a sourpuss face on it. I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
Yeah. And during the celebration, George is down on the podium with the champagne celebrations. Toto's sitting in the garage talking to his wife. And I thought, okay, well, it's FaceTime. Why are you not done celebrating?
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's strange.
I don't know. Something's odd there. I don't know. I don't want to read into it. All right, let's talk about... shall we talk about McLaren?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, let's talk about McLaren. Lando, Norris, P5, Oscar Piastri, P2. Lando ran wide at the start, losing a couple places, 3 places ultimately, and then got stuck in a DRS train and dirty air. And I'm curious your thoughts on this. It did seem, in hindsight, I look back, Oscar made the comment that clean air is king. And getting stuck in those DRS trains, both of them, the McLaren were trimmed out for speed, and both those cars really did seem to struggle in their lower downforce trim when they were behind other cars. They really seemed to struggle with that. Did you get that sense too, Paul?
Yeah, and it's twofold, right? They trim it out, so the limitations or the margins there for getting disturbed air affecting the car greater are larger because of that, because they're at that kind of low downforce level, but also that means the DRS isn't as powerful, right? The DRS, so when they're behind, they're getting a little bit of a wake there, unfortunate, and then obviously the DRS, once they open it, doesn't really shove them forward as much as possible. They're obviously expecting to lead from the front, which we were expecting too. We were and then maybe they would have run away with it, but being caught back there, and obviously Lando made an error that I think he paid for the whole race, quite honestly, in that first turn.
Yeah, I think he did too. I think it's one of those small bobbles that you just couldn't recover from given the multiple factors in his race, being susceptible to dirty air, not being able to pass as easy. I don't know what his degradation level was, but yeah, he stayed out long, but was undercut, and he couldn't regain ground to the podium, and he admitted that he made too many mistakes out there. So
it was a scrappy race for him, really. I wonder, if the talk of championships and that he's driving the best car now, and maybe to some degree pressure from his teammate, that he's a couple of little cracks. I'm not saying he can't bring it back. He's still, not a young driver, but he's still in the formative years. Maybe he's at the height, but he doesn't mean he's perfect yet.
Yeah.
I just feel like he's trying to make things happen that maybe aren't there sometimes.
A little bit what Charles is doing too.
Yeah, Charles has been doing that for a long while, actually.
Yes.
But yeah, it wasn't a great race for Norris at all. I think Piastri had a great race. I think that guy's pretty special, and
he's very special.
I think he really does keep the pressure on Norris. And
I think he does too. I think he's got Mark Webber as a manager. Mark is a tiger. I'll guarantee you, they've had conversations between Mark and Oscar about knocking Lando's feet off the desk at McLaren, right. And I'm not so sure Oscar can't do it. When he had clean air, he was leading and was putting in some terrific laps once in the clean air or clear air. Even after a second stop, he was clawing back time on Lewis, making Lewis saying, my gosh, that's insane lap times. You think I can beat him,
Yeah.
He was worried, right? But once he got into that aero wash Lewis car, seemed to stall out a little bit. Right. You might argue, I had McLaren doing better than this on the balance of the weekend, and felt that their limitations in quality would really pay dividends on Sunday. But as they were trimmed out, they were kind of hindered by that in hindsight. But, one point in time, I guess you could argue, had he not skidded along in his pit box and had that 4-second stop, I don't know that he would have got back out ahead of Leclerc, but he might have, or at least it may not have taken 2 laps to get around Charles.
Right.
And had he gotten around Charles quicker or even undercut him a little bit, maybe he had a better shot at Lewis. I don't know. Yeah,
it's hard to say because obviously, as I say, in the wake of the air, it was difficult at best.
Yeah.
Right. But and then obviously Russell giving Lewis the DRS helped him too. To stave him off, right? If Russell had been behind both of them, maybe something special could have happened for Piastri. But the DRS train's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, still a P2 for Oscar after coming off of a P1. It's what a great result for him.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc P3, Carlos Sainz P6, and big props to Carlos Sainz taking the gamble on Williams that was just released today that he's moving to Williams. Everybody's like, whoa.
Well, that's upgraded Williams as a team. They just need the funding to keep it going, right? But definitely upgraded the driver pairing. I hope this doesn't mean that the investors just chunked in enough money to afford Carlos as a big name. Yeah. And that he saw something with their program and the amount of investments they're going to come to make the whole team better. I hope that's what's happening. Because we hope, because obviously Logan was bringing in money. And so now you're, instead of a driver bringing in money, you're got a driver that you're having to pay to drive. And so, yes, certainly it's a change in philosophy. Maybe it's all part of the plan. Maybe. That they're gradually trying to build it up to... You're never going to start winning races unless you start paying for drivers, you have the right funding, right? And maybe, they've been trying to build that slowly within the rules with the cost cap and all this kind of stuff. Maybe. So I'm excited for it. Yeah, if they end up hiring Adrian Newey, it's for real. Somebody putting some serious money behind that team. Williams again. That would be something. That would be good. Let's see.
Anyway, Charles held on to the lead at the start, and that was kind of, as I mentioned, thanks to Perez and Hamilton sort of battling it out for P2, and that kept him behind him. He looked good for a few laps, but once DRS opened, he became kind of a sitting duck for Lewis at that point. Lost the lead out, but that wasn't it. He didn't drift like a stone to the back of the grid. He hung right in there. He was thereabouts for a majority of the race. Lewis had that 2-second gap over him, but he didn't really stretch it out any further than that. Charles kept him within striking range there in a couple of seconds, was in the hunt all afternoon, finishing P3, couldn't hold Piastri off as Oscar was on a tear late in the race. Couldn't hold him off, ended up in P4, inherited P3 with the disqualification, but not a bad race, in total, just didn't quite have the pace to really be at the sharp end. Yeah,
I think that's the thing. Ferrari are just a tick off, but they have no glaring issues like we've seen in the past where the tires go offwards, they go backwards like the Haas car or whatever. So I think it's encouraging, but they do know that they don't have the fastest car out there. And he got up front, and that was great and making the most of it, but they still need a lot. They need to find something in that car to stop fighting it out with the McLarens and the Mercedes team, I think, and the Red Bull, obviously. But,
Yeah, Carlos, he tried a little something different, from a strategy. He started on hards, ran long. I was wondering at one point, though, Paul, when the conversation about one-stoppers came up, and he's kind of out there in the lead, and I wonder if he could pull off a one-stopper, but
right.
I don't know. They chose a two-stop, ended up down in P6.
It was a weird one. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, because I thought Sainz was kind of not really in the game, and then when he was on the hards and he started keeping pace pretty well at front, clean air is king and all that business. I was like, man, I don't know. Maybe Sainz is going to pull one out here because this looks pretty good. But then they gave him such a short stint on the mediums.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure what they were thinking because they basically kind of gave him nothing.
Yeah.
That call pretty much put him where he ended up, and there was no way he was going to come back from that. Right. I think, that they should have rolled for the one stopper because like Russell, you weren't going to lose anything if you had to come in the end anyway, but at least give it a go and try and make those mediums last. You've lost half your fuel. You made the hards last half, so I think it was worth a gamble, and I really thought that's what they were going for. But then as soon as they pitted him for the second time, I was like, okay, well, all's lost for Carlos, I'm afraid.
No, I thought it did too, because you had Charles up the road, so you had that in the bank, and why not roll the dice with Carlos? Yeah. Anyway, not how it finished. Red Bull, Sergio Perez, P7.
You like my face? You like it?
No, apparently Helmut Marko didn't either. He said he had a total collapse. I think a lot of people think Helmut's going to be like,
goodbye, good luck, and good riddance.
Yeah, a lot of people think this weekend he just lost his ride. Finishing P7, Max down to P4. Perez had the best spot really in P2 to get Leclerc to mug him down Kimmel Straight at the start, but having that sort of mediocre start, and then he got hung up fighting Hamilton, meant that he couldn't hang on to it. Ends up losing P2, drifts backwards. He only really had two sets of mediums, so did Max, and I think this kind of hobbled Red Bull over the weekend, having those two mediums instead of two hards as an option. He was passed by George and then both McLarens and his teammate twice as he drifted backwards, and then they stopped him late and he got the fast lap, but that's kind of cold concessions. So things are not good for Sergio. Helmut Marko effectively saying he basically collapsed during the race. Not a good race for the Mexican.
No, it wasn't awful, but it wasn't what he needed. He needed, he was starting on the front row. It was like, okay, well, Sergio, everyone's like, oh, it's like this was his moment, and there was no moment, right? It was an average race. Wasn't, as I said, didn't end up in the gravel trap. That's great, but your teammate comes from 11th, passes you twice. You end up the last of the top four teams.
Yeah,
basically, Russell, obviously he came 7th, but basically he was the bottom end of the top four constructors who were able to even be competitive and be able to win a race right now. So I don't think it's great. I think obviously the test this week between Ricciardo and Lawson also, not good sign. If they weren't thinking about changing something now, I think they would be waiting for that test. But I think they're thinking about it now.
Yeah.
And so I think Sergio, maybe not long for the Red Bull world. Lots of speculation. What would happen? Would he go down to the other team? I don't see it. I don't see. I think once you quit on Sergio, I think you quit on him full, and he's going to have to figure it out. I just don't see him just sliding down to the lower team. I don't think there's any point in that.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Max had an initial good progress. He started in 11th, made up several places there, and then, okay, maybe he could march back up to the podium. I may have this wrong, but in the end, once he got up to Norris, he was pretty much stuck in the DRS train too, chewing up his tires at that point. Also had 2 mediums left. And after using the hard, he really couldn't find the pace to march to the sharp end of the grid from that point. It's a shame because he was the quickest car, on Friday and Saturday, and looked like this would be a really good race for him. It didn't really turn out that way. And again, I kind of feel like that reduced DRS zone sort of neutered a little bit of those easy passes. Not totally, but I think in large part it may have a little bit. And for Max,
I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, me too. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And so, I think really it's good damage limitation. I think Max kind of felt like, it's kind of where we were. It's what we had, but it was about damage limitation. I finished ahead of Lando, and that's what I needed to do for the Drivers' Championship. He's right. Why would the team be animated about Perez? Because that's the championship that pays money, and that's the one they're at risk of losing.
Right.
So,
right.
Big
Exactly.
deal.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, he definitely did a good job. It wasn't, miraculous, but it's to do those miracles, you need to be a great driver in a great car, and the Red Bull isn't quite there right now. I think Max is doing an incredible job. You put him up against Sergio, and he's still quite a bit faster. He's still doing things Sergio can't do. Yeah. He's carrying that car a little bit, giving that little bit of extra that's keeping it competitive, and probably will end up giving him the driver's title.
Right.
Can they hold on to constructors? That's going to be a little more iffy right now, depending on what they do with the second driver. Yeah, he can't do it on his own this year. No.
Let's see. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll P11, Fernando Alonso P10. Aston Martin did one-stoppers for both drivers in the end, so they kind of read the tea leaves, felt like that might work. It did work for Alonso. It got him up into P8. It would have been P9 inherited P8. Fernando said that the hard worked really well, and he said that the degradation on his car anyway was not as bad as they had thought it would be, so they opted for that one-stop strategy and got him up there. So a good result for him, and claiming him P8. And just to tack on, there's not a lot to say about Lance. He radioed in, said the straight line speed was a joke, and ran out of tires late in the race, wasn't able to score any points. So I don't know if the degradation was quite a bit different for Lance and Fernando, but Fernando made the most of it, and ended up P is a good race for him.
I think it was a great race for Fernando. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, obviously the next best of the constructors, and from where they were, I thought they were actually going to be going backwards, but I think Alonso put in a solid race to get the points that he did score for that team.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see, Alpine, Pierre Gasly P13, Esteban Ocon P9. Bit of a reversal for Alpine this weekend. Ocon lost out to Max at the start, but that was kind of a foregone conclusion. But then he put his head down, made his way up into the points poll, had some overcuts late in the race, managed to hunt down Ricciardo for P10, made that stick, which turned into P9. They trimmed the car out for speed down the straights. He made the most of it. It was actually a decent run. Nobody was expecting Alpine to win the race. Yeah. But for Alpine, given the performance in the last few races, the DNFs and stuff like that, not a bad run for Esteban. It had some good passing, some good battles. In the point.
Yeah, he was fighting feisty. And I think good for the team because we know they're down on power, and this is a track that really demands good power. And so whatever they're doing to try and mask that deficit, I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, they're down on team bosses too, apparently.
Or are they? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? Gasly got stuck in DRS train, he said, and due to the tire delta between him and Ocon, let Esteban go. It got past. So he played the team game there for sure. Tried to score some points, but was really unable to do so. Managed some temperature issues in his car, he said, late in the race, and kind of lamented. He said, we were down on pace. I was managing some temp issues, and late in the race, he was hoping they'd switch to a one-stopper, or at least try to get him up in the points. They didn't do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where he finished. Let's see. RB Den Ricciardo at P10, Yuki Tsunoda P16, as Yuki said. He started from Zandvoort. He started dead last. He had like 60 place grid penalty or what it was. He said there was something going on with his car. He said from what he heard from his engineers. So didn't elaborate. I don't know what that issue was, but it was always going to be a hard strategy, a hard day for him starting at the very back and finishing on P16 is probably the best you could imagine from Yuki. So nothing to write home to Japan about, Paul.
No, or shout and scream or swear about, apparently.
Yeah, right. I thought it was interesting. This quote. Yeah, apparently there's something wrong with my car from what I heard from the engineers. I don't know.
Wasn't me, though. Wasn't me. Dan started on softs, trying to make something happen here. And, he made some places up. Stopped hard, tried to take a point, which he inherited with George's DSQ. Dan boxed early both times and managed to undercut those around him. Couldn't hold off Ocon late, though. Ocon just had trimmed out a little quicker, faster. He had 9-lap fresher tires. Couldn't hold him off, but still claims a point from the DSQ. Yeah, I thought he was actually going to score better because fairly close to the end of the race, he was still oncoming.
Yeah,
and he seemed to lose a lot in those last few laps.
He did.
And I don't know. I'd never heard why that was because I thought he was on to beat Alonso, honestly.
I thought
and
all
of a
P8.
sudden,
he
was. There was a big gap back there. So I don't know if he made a mistake or the tires just hit that ceiling. I don't think the softs was the best move, because he didn't make a lot of gains on the soft.
He
was just as he was kind of stuck in the train, and so he wasn't able to use the soft to any kind of advantage to leapfrog him and then work his way back up with an early stop. But something happened at the end of the race there that he lost a lot of time on the track because I thought he was definitely up for P8. Yeah,
I did too. That's the exact same sentiment. You said it much better than I did, but I kind of felt like there was more in it for him, and I don't know what happened there. Yeah. Let's see. Let's talk about Williams. Carlos Sainz' new home. Williams, Alex Albon P2 and Logan Sargent P17. The man, all of the money that Logan Sargent brought to that team over the last few years is basically being used to pay for Carlos at this point.
That's going to make him feel good about himself.
Yeah, you helped us pay for Carlos. Thank you. Alex was fighting Ocon and Ricciardo all day long for a point. And in my mind, it's actually a good sign. We know that when they trim that Williams out, it's a pretty damn fast car. And it was.
Yeah.
And I think Alex was making the most of it. He fought all day, right around 10, P9, P10, fought all day, but he couldn't hold 10th against Lance Stroll's one-stopper. That left him down in P12, unfortunately. He lamented the fact that he didn't have two sets of hards. He was stuck with mediums, too. Right. And that's unfortunate because, he kind of felt like that might have made the difference. But it's a shame because very much like Daniel, I felt like Alex was thereabout for a point, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's always tight in that battle, right now. Yeah. So, just lost out a little bit. Maybe tire choice was the determining factor. But, Albon brings it every weekend, honestly.
He does. Yeah,
but I am surprised they didn't do a bit better. I thought this is one of those tracks.
I did too.
They should be a bit, I figured they would actually leapfrog the Aston actually, but as we said, Alonso put in a pretty darn good race to get that result.
Yeah, he really did. Let's see. Logan Sargent had a few battles, but drove a quiet race to P18, inherited P17, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Thank you.
Let's talk about Haas.
Oh no, it all went wrong.
Wow. What a difference the track makes, huh?
Yeah.
Nico Hulkenberg, P18, Kevin Magnussen, P14. It's a shame as the team felt like they really had a good shot at Spa. So, I mean, it's bizarre.
They got that wrong.
Yeah, or didn't. And how? And Nico's early stop was a strategy that did not work. Nico said they couldn't get the car in the sweet spot all weekend long. He said, just could not get it there. No matter what they tried, could not get that car in the sweet spot to make any hay with it. And it's a shame because they really felt like once they got that car in that sweet spot, they'd have a pretty good weekend. Did not happen for Haas. Kevin tried that one stopper, was in the points briefly, but then the cars around him stopped later than he did. So he was out of that delta, that tire delta, and he couldn't hold them off. Kevin said that they didn't do anything wrong, really. They just simply didn't have the pace, period.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, there was a lot of highlights of DRS passes going past the Haas cars, unfortunately. So I think that was
pretty
about their
stunning pace delta, even in DRS, really.
Yeah. But we know that car's a bit better than that. I mean, it's going to have a couple of bad tracks, and this was one of them, even if they ddidn't foresee it. So
so maybe Zandvoort, we're looking for the bounce back.
Yeah.
And then finally is Kick Sauber. I got nothing. It's just a miserable weekend. A DNF for Joe Guan Yu, P15 for Valtteri. I don't.
Yeah, obviously in management, everyone's jumping out, being tossed out, whatever it is. I mean, we were speculating with this team that, they're just kind of treading water and they're doing things behind the scenes, to come in strong when the Audi name finally goes on the side of the car.
Assuming that Audi
that's
had
not
their
true.
crap together.
Right. Evidently, that's not true. Obviously, Seidel's out. There's got to be a good reason that they had bigger expectations of, and that the gears are in process for building this into an Audi factory team, and they're not achieving literally anything. Yeah. And you can't blame the drivers, I don't think. They may not be the most special, but they're obviously they're not duds either. And Bottas and Zhou have done some very, very good things in the past. So that team itself is trouble, and I think that's probably another reason why Sainz decide, why would I get in that place?
It may have been.
Yeah, I'm sure Sainz is trying to look for a home till he can then go back up to a top team, or unless Williams can be a top team, but. You don't want to waste a couple of years driving the pea green car or whatever the hell it is.
No. I agree with Paul. I'm 100%. When we were talking about that, we thought they're just treading water. Audi's going to come in. Audi's a professional, racing team. This is a big company. They know what they're doing. They've got Andreas Seidel, and we felt that, or at least I did. I felt that the mothership, once they take over in 2026, right now they're working on their engine program, chassis, and all that, and then they're going to let the green cars drive around for a couple of years. But once it comes, and then to see all of this shakeup at Audi with Seidel out, and now we're going to bring Binotto in, and it was like, whoa.
Yeah, and
I wonder if Nico got hint of any of that before signing. I don't know.
Yeah, it's, but they let go of a lot of programs. They dropped their sports car program. The GT3 program is kind of ticking along, but they're not really pushing that any. No hypercar, none of this. All because they wanted to give their full attention and effort to their F1 team. And something's obviously gone very wrong there.
And either
they underestimated what it takes to be a Formula One team.
Well, that's entirely possible.
Yeah, it could be possible.
As you know. Mm-hmm. You've been there. You've been around. You've been with an F1 team. When you've watched it for so long, we talked about it with Haas. I guarantee you, Gene underestimated what it really takes.
He definitely did.
In F1, every small team that comes in. Eddie Jordan will tell you that.
Yep.
They all will. Audi had this big course. Look, Binotto may not have won a championship with Ferrari, but he does know what the hell he's doing.
Right.
So we'll see. Yeah. All right. Let's give out some awards. First race award that we hand is Move of the Race.
Stop yelling at Todd.
Don't yell at me. It's just my opinion.
Yeah.
My move of the race, George Russell, changing to a one-stopper on his gut feel And even when he told the team that, and they crunched the numbers and said, yeah, we have him at worst staying in P5. Mm-hmm. And then he wins. Amazing drive.
Yeah, I agree. I can't think of a better move through that whole race than George's call there.
Yeah,
great,
stunning. Mm-hmm. All right, next award we give out is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Yes. All right, Paul, who'd you have for Donkey of the Race?
I got Lando.
Oh, Jesus.
Really?
Sorry, Lando.
Lando.
That was a too many errors.
Teammates beating you up a little bit, Lando.
Yeah, the pressure is coming on. You got to beat Max to try and beat him in a championship, and making errors as such are not going to get you there. So you need to clean it up a little bit, boy. I know he's got this pace, and the car's got the pace. Yeah, and sometimes you live in a different world when you actually have that option. So he's going to have to think a little bit. It's not a big, horrible problem he's got going on, but he does need to tidy himself up a little bit.
Maybe a little word of advice, Lando. Maybe some very late night sim racing will help you.
Get you yelled Jackie at. Stewart, for crying out loud.
Oh my gosh, Crofty will be just incandescent if you stay up late. He'll be calling your mom. Crazy. All right, final award is always drive of the race.
Get down. Get in there, Lewis.
Get in there, Lewis.
Well, you didn't pick your donkey, though.
Oh, sorry.
Ahead of yourself.
You like it?
I picked Perez.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have Perez. Sorry. Nobody cares what my picks are. They just want to hear what your picks are.
That's not true.
It is true.
Yeah, didn't want to beat up on Perez again.
I didn't.
I like the guy. I think he's a good driver.
I like me some Sergio.
He's just in a bad plot
situation
right now. I don't think his career's over. I just think that is just not working right now.
Yeah.
Or will ever.
Yep. Who'd you have for drive?
It's Russell.
That's who I had.
Yeah.
George Russell.
How do you argue with that?
You can't.
Oh, you can't.
You can't.
I don't know who won the popular vote, but I don't think it was
Lewis.
Yeah. Don't agree with that.
Did. No. Don't agree. Although I will say Lewis had a great drive.
Yeah, it did have a great drive, but he did have
great
a great
drive.
He didn't have
But it wasn't the
drive.
best.
No.
George had the best run. What he did on those softs on those hards is amazing.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Well, that's what we think about this race. Let us know what you think about this race. And I know all the Grace fans are out there saying, well, you're going to have Grace on. We're going to have Grace on. Yeah. Grace is still there. I guarantee you she's doing one of three things. Watching Formula One races, maybe. Definitely watching MotoGP races and hanging out with her cats. She's there. So go find her.
Probably watching basketball Olympics now. So
she might be. LeBron's there, right? She's watching. You know?
Yeah, she's watching it.
So anyway, all right, Paul. Good luck at Road America.
Thank you.
Yep.
Exciting
and bring home a winner. And then we'll be back next week to do it all over again. Huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. We could not do this podcast without you. Can I be any more clear? No. If we didn't have you, we wouldn't do this podcast. So thank you for our Patreon supporters and future Patreon supporters out there. If you like the podcast, go to your favorite player, leave us a good review, give us some love there. And until next week when we come back and do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
I don't feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a certain type of car.